The goal of this lesson was for students to be able to identify that the Boston Tea Party was a key event that the colonists had in reaction to British rule. They are exploring how colonists reacted to these changes that British rule was implementing, and we wanted students to be able to identify the main idea of the Boston Tea Party and the key details that support that main event. Our cluster 2 question that we've been exploring: how did the people of Massachusetts respond to conflict with Britain? I want you to think about that for a second. Give me a thumbs up when you have a thought. How are the people of Massachusetts responding to conflict with Britain during this time period? Cluster 1, we started with the new king makes a new rule. What was that rule? Charlotte.
No colonists could move on to indigenous lands.
You got it. The new king said there is no more moving on to indigenous lands. And how did the colonists feel about that? Show me with your thumbs. Not great. 10,000 British troops arrived. Why did those troops arrive? Why did they arrive, Jonathan? To enforce those rules. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, they started to put these acts in place to make the colonists pay taxes. Cluster 2 launched, and we talked about Crispus Attucks. We had rising tensions. The colonists were getting angry. The troops had arrived. Things started to progress. Boston Massacre happened. And then our last couple lessons, we did our revolutionary VIPs. You worked together in groups. So we originally started the arc with launching the question of how is Massachusetts important to the revolution. We wanted students to continue investigating sources that built upon that knowledge. They knew that there was rising tensions happening. We wanted students to be able to connect to that prior knowledge of those taxes and really build up that tension. So we went back and we talked about what happened in clusters 1 and 2 so far, so that they could follow that inquiry arc and continue seeing where the colonists were going from there. We have an image here on the screen. We're going to observe it. What type of source is it? What do you notice? What do you wonder? What objects do you see? I want you to pair up with someone and share out. What are you thinking or wondering about what you see in this image?
Throwing something off the boat.
Oh, okay. What do you see, Juliana? Okay. What do you see, Camden?
And that's how Native Americans are Americans.
Ooh, okay. What makes you think that they're Native American?
They're wearing this thing in their head.
Oh, so it looks like some traditional indigenous headdresses. Okay. What else did you see, Charlotte?
I wonder, I see Native Americans on the ship because when you watched the video, it said that the Patriots and the Sons of Liberty were on the ship.
Interesting. Okay, so bringing in some of that background knowledge from something we saw earlier this week. What kind of a source, Jamie?
A picture.
A picture? Okay. Can we say more about that, Hadley?
Painting or drawing.
A painting or a drawing. Oh, a couple of friends, me too, in that. Okay. This source was made by an artist named Nathaniel Currier. He was born in 1813 in Roxbury, Massachusetts. That's right outside of Boston. The type of work is a lithograph colored by hand. So I believe that is a printing. A lithograph is a type of print that was then colored by hand. It was created in 1846 to represent an event from the Revolutionary America in 1773. Do you think that type of source is a primary source or a secondary source?
Secondary.
Why do we think it's secondary?
Because it was oral. Because it's a lot of years later.
Okay. What kind of a source do we think this is? Primary or secondary? What do we think? Landon?
Secondary.
Secondary. And why do we think this is a secondary source? Violet, what do you think?
Because you said it was printed and hand-colored.
Okay. So the way that it was made, you're wondering if that wasn't around as a primary source? Okay.
It happened, and back then they didn't really live to 70.
1846 is a long time after 1773. And like you said, bringing in some of that background knowledge, people didn't live that long back then. So maybe this person wasn't alive when this event happened. Now we're going to read. We're going to look for more information that's going to connect to what we just observed. Okay? With a partner, you are going to read through a Boston Tea Party informational text. Make sure you're observing those text features as you're reading as well. After you read through this source, you are going to identify the main idea and 3 supporting details. What I want you to do in your text is just like we do our close reads and reading. I want you to highlight what you think the main idea is, and I want you to underline the 3 details first. We spent a lot of time in the first unit talking a lot about primary and secondary sources, so that way they would be able to identify a primary and a secondary source. We actually do a lot of that work with our reading program as well, and knowing that a primary source is going to be something that was authentically during that event. A secondary source is something that happens later and is reporting out on that primary event. So I was really proud of my students being able to identify that the source we looked at today was a secondary source because it was created a lot longer after the event that it was depicting. And so I made sure that I chose partners that would work well together and support each other throughout the process. I had some students that were grouped mostly by reading level so that if they needed some help decoding some multisyllabic words, I could sit with them and help them kind of chunk those out. In addition, I did preview some of those larger words with some of my lower readers, so that way they were able to access the grade level text with their partner and do that work of identifying the main idea in detail and less of trying to just decode the text. I had some students who came in midway, and I had them grouped in a trio so that way they could support each other, kind of coming in mid-lesson if needed. Why do you think the governor agreed to have the tea stay, but the colonists didn't? Who was the governor in connection with? Do you remember from that lesson?
The British.
The British, right? The king?
Did he agree with the king? Arrived in Boston, John Haynes.
Because the king was working with the leaders in the colonies, right? Yeah. I wonder if that's going to be an issue.
They were throwing tea into the ocean.
Why were they doing that?
Because that's how they were saying no to the British rule.
Oh, do we think that's an important detail?
Yes.
Maybe we should underline that. So when they are protesting, what are they protesting?
They're protesting no to the British rule.
And what were the British rules that we talked about?
Some of the British rules. Not letting the colonists go into indigenous land.
Yeah, and then after that there were more rules that were given. They had to do what?
They had to
You can look at the timeline.
obey all the rules. They had to not go into indigenous land.
So that was the first part of our timeline. After that we had the Stamp Act. What was the Stamp Act?
Money.
They had to pay
More
money
than they should.
because they didn't get to vote on that, right? What is it called when you don't agree with something and you do something against it?
Disagreement.
A disagreement, a conflict. We talked about that word. What about, starts with a P? What were they doing? We have some words up on our wall.
Protest.
Protesting. Why do you think those people were protesting a new train?
Don't like Russia that they were fighting the war.
Oh, so it was a different kind of protest happening.
Yeah.
Okay. When I have students partner up and group up to do this work, I am initially checking in with some groups that I think might need some help getting started, initiating that task. Once I see that they have gotten started, I make sure that they're on the right track. As I was checking in and circulating with some students, there were some students who were having trouble identifying that main idea, so we went back to, well, what was the Boston Tea Party? And sometimes I use the little expressions like, was it a tea party where they were sitting around and drinking tea and having cookies? And that kind of gets them back on track of like, no, we know what we were reading was about this. It was about throwing the crates of tea into the harbor. And that helps kind of get them on the right track. And then using that main idea to find those supporting details as well. There were some students who I noticed were having some trouble decoding those longer words, so a very quick covering of a longer word into the syllables to help them kind of sound it out in those chunks was very useful for a couple kiddos that were sitting on the carpet today.
Let's make a sentence. We need to talk about who first. You told me the Patriots, right? So Allie, we're gonna start with who, right? So the Patriots, right? And then maybe we can, what you highlighted down here.
What was the main idea of this passage? Griffin, what do you think? The Boston Tea Party. So that is the topic of this passage. Can we say more? Let's turn that into a main idea. Jonathan.
In Boston, threw lots of British tea into the water.
Do we agree with that? Yeah. Was that what this was mostly about? Yes. So the Boston Tea Party was an event where the Patriots threw tea into Boston Harbor. I need 3 details to support that. 3 things that say more about that main idea. Landon, give me one.
The Patriots were angry because the British government tried to control the tea trade by making them pay extra taxes.
Do we agree with that? You can give a me too? Excellent. Lots of me too's. Hadley, another one.
They gathered in 3 groups on the Griffin Wharf and built ships.
So they gathered, they got onto 3 ships. If you added a little bit more to that, but you still have that information, you can still give a me too to agree with Hadley. Nico?
They brought tools like axes to break open wooden crates holding the tea.
Do we agree? Was that important? Yeah. Yep. Why do we think that they dressed as indigenous people instead of just boarding the ships? Ryan, what do you think?
So they didn't actually know it was Patriots.
So they were almost in a disguise. Were we right with some of our observations?
Yeah.
What do we think we are seeing in this picture?
I see lots of people holding hats up and maybe they're yelling at them.
So we originally thought they were yelling at them. What do we think they might be doing now that we know that this was an intentional thing that was done? What do you think, Hadley?
I think they're cheering.
You think they're cheering? Camden's agreeing? Okay. All right, friends, we have one more thing we need to do. What do we need to add to our timeline? What needs to be added? Isla. The Boston Tea Party. We need to add that event onto our timeline. So we will do that, and it will help us move forward in our time.